This is episode 29 of the Hybrid Coaching Podcast. In this episode, we talk a little bit about the upcoming HYROX races, including Chicago and Hong Kong. And then we dive into strength training for hybrid fitness, how to do it, what the basis of it is, how the interference effect plays, and how to mitigate it. Let's make hybrid fitness work for you.
Oh, straight away. Oh,
There he is, the man,
there you are. You're the man.
the hardest working man.
You're the hardest working man. Did she go down?
I just got Lily down for a nap. Today was not the easiest one. She did not want to go for a nap right now, but was able to get her going. So took a couple readings of where the wild things are and brown bear, and then going through brown bear, and naming the animals and making some animal noises and asking her what they are, and then trying to help her with her alphabet a little bit too. So she's learning that. We were doing A, B, C, D, E, about where she's at now. So
So, apart from all the science we've been talking about, listeners, Anthony is really good at teaching the alphabet as well, not just all the science and threshold training chat.
So I just look at it as like everything with our training, is foundations. Get to basics. The broader your base, the bigger your foundation.
Yeah.
As long as you can do the most common things well over and over and over again, then you will progress and the harder things become easier. So you just got to start with that. So if you're having trouble with whatever language you speak, if it's English, because that's what we're talking now, right? If it's English, start singing the alphabet, going over or doing grammar, doing your kids' homework with them again, go through school again, watch what happens.
It's so true, actually. Yeah, I like that.
Get back to the
But
basics.
also, it's the same concept when it comes to fitness, right? Totally.
Exactly. You need to have the basic movements down.
Yeah.
And you need to have them down well and build off of that.
Definitely.
Because just as an example, a lot of people are like, oh, gymnastics is hard and complicated, right? Well, if you can do lots and lots of strict pull-ups, lots and lots of strict dips, if you can move your body, do a cartwheel, a forward roll, a backward roll, gymnastics builds off of that. So if you can do those things well, you start to be able
Yeah.
to do everything else really well.
Everything else really well. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just like, and that's what we'll get into a little bit later today. I kind of talk about it, strength training. And that's a great intro for what we're going to get into, because one of the things we're talking about today is strength training and how to develop strength training and hybrid fitness, because a lot of things in the past have said there's the interference effect, which we'll get into and everything. And so we'll develop that. And good thing is, JK, in today's lesson type thing, I relate it to raising a child. And if you are a parent and you can see the growth and development of your child, you'll actually understand a little bit better about your own growth and development with training, with weightlifting, with strength training. And we'll get into those definitions as well soon.
I'm
So,
excited.
yeah, I'm very excited. Uh, so what have you been up to recently, JK? Give us a little update.
Oh, um, bit of training, bit of working, bit of programming, bit of coaching. We've got from my end here in Australia right now, I've got 1 week until the Hong Kong major. So the last week or so has been it's been a week. It's been a big volume training week, which has been solid, and getting ready for Hong Kong has been my major focus. Georgie and I leave for Hong Kong tomorrow, which is Saturday. We arrive Sunday morning, so we're there for the whole week before the race, and yeah, that's pretty much what we've been up to, mate. Just kind of rinsing and repeating um most days. So yeah, I'm excited for this one. Obviously, first major in the APAC region, which is exciting for me. Um, ready to go.
That's awesome. So one thing wanted to start this with just real fast because we do have a bit to cover today and I want to make sure we get to all of it. But you asked me a question. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. I think it was yesterday. So the lineups for Hong Kong came out yesterday. And you asked me this question. Who that is not lined up on the Elite 15 in Hong Kong will make the Elite 15 at Worlds, right? So who on this list that's not here is actually going to qualify for Worlds? That's a really good question. And so I thought about it, and I'd like to hear your answers first, but now that the lists are out, what are you
Okay.
thinking?
I think I'll just start off with in my opinion, the obvious one to me is that Hunter McIntyre will qualify for the world for the Elite 15 for Worlds. He is not racing in Hong Kong, so that's the obvious one for me. Um, I think there's a chance in my opinion that, and I apologize for not getting his name correct slash his whole name right, but Fabian, who has the no, actually, he doesn't have the open world record. He did a
He's second, I think.
52.
Yeah,
Yes, I think he has a true potential to make it this year with what he's done so far. And and then on top of that, Anthony, actually no, look, I don't want to just. That's probably the two that they're the only two that I personally think has true potential. The other one,
it's
sorry to wrap it up, is that I personally think Marcus Wallace has a red hot chance to make the Elite 15 this year as well.
yeah. I'm glad you said that one. So looking at it, it's hard, right? Because if you look at it the way it is right now, you see this whole lineup. These are all great. There's 15 great guys on here, but every name that you list that you think will be at the Elite 15 in Worlds means that somebody on this list right now won't be.
Yeah,
So somebody racing in Hong Kong, if you say somebody else is going to be there, that means somebody else won't be. So it's a tough call. I agree with those names. I'm gonna go with the three easy ones to start with, and that's I think Hunter, Dylan Scott, and Ryan Kent will get spots. Um,
sorry, I apologize. I did leave out Ryan Kent and Dylan Scott there.
yeah.
Correct.
So I think those two will get spots, or those three, and then I actually think I mean I responded to you. I said there's four names, and it's those three and Marcus Wallace. I think
Mm,
Marcus is red hot. He's following the hybrid engine right now, and he has a race in Chicago this weekend. I'm real excited to watch. He has a great game plan going in. He could take the win, and it'd be a win against some really good competition too. There's a lot of
definitely.
sub 60 guys in this race, and if he goes out there
Yeah,
and makes a statement like he did in Toronto, it's going to be very high potential for him to qualify possibly in Vegas, maybe Glasgow, but a really good shot in Barcelona. So
yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah.
look at it that way. What about the women's side? Have you looked at that?
I'll be honest, I don't know the women's side um to like to have a good opinion, I'll be honest. So I'll leave that with you, Anthony. I know for a fact that you obviously do. So what are your picks, if you have
Well,
any?
same thing on this side. Is it like, every name that you list here, there's going to be somebody on this list right now that is going to have to not make it to
Mm,
to make room for these people. Uh, Obvious easy choice is Meg's not racing in Hong Kong and she'll already be at Worlds. So there's an easy one. Uh, Looking at the other auto qualifier, Vivian. I think Vivian makes Worlds this year, third place last year, fourth place the year before. She'll make Worlds. She's not racing in Hong Kong. And then I'm pretty excited for Hong Kong actually because there's six women that follow the hybrid engine racing in Hong Kong again, and then you, Elite
that's so
15.
good. I
So,
love that, mate.
but
Congratulations.
yeah, it's
That's
it's
huge.
fun. I also think on the women's side, currently not in the Elite 15 or not racing Hong Kong, but I think we'll be at the Elite 15 Worlds. Maria Fecek
Mm,
also going to be racing Chicago this weekend. So I think
right.
she has some good competition that she'll go. And again, I think if Marcus and Maria put down great times, it's going to be a fantastic event. And then I think other people with shots are Amy Bilavacqua and Camila Massa. I
Yeah.
think Camila has a really good shot. She's not doing Hong Kong, and she's on the outside looking in for Vegas right now. But I know she's going to race sometime coming up to try to better her time, and I think she'll do really well. So yeah, is there anyone that I left off? I can't think of. I mean, there's a ton of really good women. Those 10 to 15 spots, I think the spots in Glasgow and in Barcelona are just going to be crazy competitive
Yeah, for
to get
sure.
there.
But you're right. It's funny talking about this because you see the lineups in Hong Kong, both genders, and you go, well, is there anyone that's not lining up that could potentially be like be oh sorry, could potentially make it, meaning that lineup, like there's people gonna be missing out potentially, which is crazy because you see the both genders, like both lineups are incredible. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's place your bets, right? Because it's a long season, but also, there's another three that will be qualified after next Friday night. So that's six out of the 15, almost half, which
Yeah.
again is quite exciting.
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be really, really exciting, really neat to watch. Speaking of upcoming races, though, this weekend, Chicago is going to be fantastic. You have really big men's field, a competitive women's field. The course map is out, looks a lot like last year, except for I'd say it's a better setup than last year with just the way it is looking with the farmer carry, especially. Uh,
Yeah.
People had some great times last year. Nothing like super, super good, but Chicago's shaping up to be a fantastic course, and it's only it's in on the second, right? So it's a two-lap course, and really it's not even two laps, it's 1.8 laps. So you're looking
Mm.
at a very long straightaway, fast top speeds, a little bit longer of a rock zone, but some fast top speeds going to be able to be done there. And I think people are really going to push it. I and with the number of men, there's 50 men in the first heat, the first men's pro heat, 50 men, and
5-0.
yeah, 5-0. And I
Wow.
think I think there's like 15 of them can or have gone under an hour already. It's
Wow,
just
that's
so many. Like
great.
I that's probably not the right number, but in terms of people that
Yeah.
can are running their first one potential, it is packed with great
Mm.
talent on the men's side, and some
That's
really good talent
exciting.
on the women's side.
Yeah, it's exciting. And good for sport and also those athletes who, someone like Marcus Wallace who's trying to get another good time. He's racing against other athletes who have gone sub 60. It's just going to push someone like him even more. So, Yeah, that's on 7:30 p.m. Chicago time,
Yep.
Saturday night, isn't it?
Yep. 7:30
Yep.
p.m. Chicago time, Saturday night. So if you're in my time zone, that's 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And for
6:30.
JK, that's 11:30 in the morning for you.
I'll be. Oh, is it? Oh, mate. Yes. I'll be in Hong Kong, so it'll be 9:30 a.m.
Oh,
in
okay.
Hong Kong. Yeah, 9:30
On
a.m.
Saturday?
Yeah.
Oh, no, because it's Sunday for you. Yeah, Sunday,
It's
9:30 in the
Sunday
morning.
morning in Hong Kong, so I've just landed.
Yep.
We've just landed in Hong Kong.
And
So,
that's exciting. I think it's going to be just a great race. Trying to figure out a way to watch it. Some people have said there might be some Instagram live streams, so gonna go hunt some of those down. If anybody does
is
know of some Instagram live streams, shoot them my way.
is Matt is Matt going to be there? Do you
No,
know?
I don't think so. I think I was just talking to Marcus, and I think he said just there's a couple of people who might Instagram live it that we should be able to follow, either from Colin Stiefer's camp or David Megita's camp,
That's
or
right. Yeah.
there's people around there. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, all those guys are in the same heat, and maybe we can get somebody to stream it for us.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Before we go on, next week we'll have possibly a special episode because JK usually goes dark on week of the race. So we might have a special episode where I talk to somebody else. Um, or we also maybe possibly see lots of what are those called? Contingencies there, just in case. We might
Contingency.
have a
Yeah.
possible bonus episode with the Elite 15 after Hong Kong show if we can get that set up again. I don't think Lauren
Yep.
Griffith will be a part of it because I'm pretty sure she has an early flight out the next morning, and Kate might also have an early flight out the next morning. So I don't know if they'll be part of it, but I know that if they're able to, might be able to sit down for 30, 45 minutes and talk about their race, which would just be fantastic.
Yep. That's the plan. That's the plan. So apologies about not being around next week, Anthony, and the listeners, but hopefully we can get that bonus episode out for
I
you guys
have
as
some
well.
ideas. I might actually bring somebody on and talk to them, but I haven't even asked them yet, so maybe not. We'll see. Um, all right, going on. Now we're gonna get to our strength training one. I'm not gonna pull up a PowerPoint this time, so if you guys are listening, you can just keep listening. You don't have to watch any videos. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm gonna refer to and talk about, but it is not all pretty. I didn't take the time to design it, so we're just gonna leave it for my notes and have it be that way. We're going to talk about some strength training. Some key important parts of strength training today are just going into it, your training age. I'll discuss what training age is and all of that. I'm going to discuss other parts of strength training, such as uh, Olympic lifting or weightlifting versus powerlifting, what the difference is. And when I say, oh, your strength training or your powerlifting, what that actually means versus the movements you're doing. We'll go into everybody's favorite topic, the interference effect. We do a lot of aerobic conditioning. We do a lot of aerobic endurance. We do a lot of running. Those are very catabolic exercises. Strength training is anabolic, right? So you put your body in two different states here. And it's very important to go over what does the literature say about the interference effect and what does it mean? What is the interference effect? Right? And is it both ways? Does strength training affect running and does running affect strength training, or is it only one direction? And we'll get into a little
Yep.
bit about that. We'll talk about development. So, strength development. How do you develop strength and what do you do? And then RFD. So, RFD is the rate of force development. It's one of my favorite things to mitigate some of the stuff of interference effect. And I think it's really important for aerobic conditioning to have a high RFD. Three phases. There's three phases to a lift. We'll go over what they are. and how to train each one. I'll address power and finally applied strength, what it is and everything. Now, I know how I approach strength training. One thing, if anybody doesn't know about me, I actually, in terms of certifications and development, I have my USA weightlifting sports performance coach certification. I am a CrossFit level 3 coach. I've done CrossFit weightlifting. I actually have a very big background. I've done powerlifting, like big background in strength. And as far as when we talk about lactate and aerobic conditioning and everything, as much as that is also my background because I was doing marathon running, I had to learn a lot more in that field and study that one a lot more than I have with strength training. So strength training is a little bit more natural for me. Now,
Right.
before we start, JK, I wanted to ask you because you obviously know how I program strength. You've seen how I program strength. You follow the strength training that I program. What How do you program strength? I don't think I've ever seen it. So I'm just curious, how do you program your strength? Why do you program what you do? Do you have any like philosophies and progressions? And what's your approach to strength training?
Um, Again, this question or like the answer or like to me right now for a lot of these questions, Anthony, always starts with it depends, right? It depends on the athlete that I'm programming for. Um, However, let's just take an example from a broader perspective. Um, you need to be strong for what we're doing as hybrid athletes. But my belief is that if you have the strength already to be able to push the sled, pull the sled, walk those kettlebells, lunge really well with that weight. Yes, we need to make sure that we are continuing to develop your top end strength. But to answer the question, I look at it from a bit more of um, a strength stamina um, method as opposed to pure strength for most athletes. And as I said, it depends. I don't necessarily have a you just said like a direct like formula or method that I always stick to. It's just following the format of um pure uh pure strength volume, progressive overload over a period of time with a deload week, rinse and repeat. Um, but to come back to it, it always depends on if the athlete has the ability to be has the strength in the first place to do what we are doing. And if so, then strength endurance and stamina is always in the back of my head a little bit more than pure strength. I hope that answered the question, I guess, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, what you described there is basically, you approach strength as do it, get it in because it's important to, support your body in the other things you want to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I find strength is extremely important to health, right? I think health is the
Yeah.
strength. They did a study several years ago. I don't have it up in front of me, so I'm not gonna be able to reference it exactly. I believe the summary of the study was in geriatric patients, patients, I believe they've monitored them over, I want to say 70 years old. Uh, the number one determiner of life expectancy and well, the number one determiner of the remainder of their life, how much time they had left, was their leg strength. The more leg strength you
Wow.
had, the longer you lived. So
That's so fascinating. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Leg
I
strength
it might
versus
have been actually octogenarian,
heart.
so it was 80-year-olds. Like once you got to 80, the more leg muscle mass you had, the longer you would live. And there
Right.
was a direct correlation in that study. If I find it, I will find a way to link it. But from what I remember, that was, man, I'm trying to recall something from like 2015, 2016 that I'd read and heard about. So,
Yeah.
all right. So getting into strength training. The biggest question is like, look, with all my running, all my machine work, I have all this stuff. How and when do I do strength training? Right? When do I strength train? How do I fit it in? Um, most of the hybrid sports, one of the number one things we have to do is work on our general fitness, our aerobic capacity, right? And people coming from triathlon, people coming from marathon running, a lot of those speed skating, if they're speed skaters, hockey, like not so much hockey. Hockey's the other way, but they have these long endurance sports where they've done all of this stuff, and strength was just enough to support you. It wasn't getting stronger to move an external object, which we'll get into, which is part of applied strength, right? So, why do I do strength training and how does strength training apply for hybrid athletes? So, the number one determiner of strength training age and consistency, right?
Consistency. Yeah.
So, training age. In strength training, training age refers to the number of years a person has consistently followed a structured training program. Unlike chronological age, which is simply how old someone is, training age reflects an individual's experience level in a specific form of training, such as strength, right?
Mm.
So, what that means is how long have you been doing a back squat? The first time you step up to a back squat, that's day one. That is birth. And then every day you back squat is another day. Every day you squat with a load is another day of life, essentially, right? So I love this little analogy here. Parent and child development is an amazing teacher when it comes to demonstrating training age. The development of a baby to a toddler, to a child, to a teen, to an adult uh, is so interesting to watch. So if you are a parent out there, when a child is born, they can't do anything, right? They're solely, completely dependent on you. Um, Basically, and I've been learning this now, like for the first 4 months of life, nobody take offense to this, the child's a potato. Like you carry them around, you move them, they can't really do anything on their own. And then eventually they start to roll over. They start to learn how to roll. They start to learn different movements, grabbing their hands, getting more dexterity. And then there's a little explosion around like 10 months, 11 months, or earlier than that. But then they start to crawl, right? And then the explosion happens with now they're starting to stand up and hold on to things. And then finally they're starting to take a couple steps. And then like a month later, they're running everywhere. They're going all around, you know, they like, and
Yeah.
it takes about a year. It takes 13 months, but it took 13 months to get from this thing that was born into a small child that it can run around and move, right? And they start to be able to train and like they start to lose some of that baby fat because now they're more active. They're getting more energy expenditure throughout the day. Uh, and then they develop further and further. Then they start to talk and their speech, and you can just see their development into a human, right? Into like a full adult. They start to become more coordinated. They start to work on their alphabet, right? They start to do things. They start to sign. Like there's so many different things that a toddler just they went from a baby to a toddler. A toddler is so apparently like small human versus a baby, you know? And then they go from toddler to like a child where they start to coordinate. They're throwing a ball, they're catching, they're move like their coordination and everything is just getting better and better and better day by day, right? And then they get into a teen and now they're just, they think they're the best in the world, right? So they're the teenager. And I don't have those years yet, but we'll get to those. And then they're
Not yet. Not
then
yet.
they're the adult, right? So that progression of life is the same thing in strength training. And before I get too far into this, I want to define these. When I refer to weightlifting, specifically weightlifting, I'm meaning Olympic weightlifting, which would be snatches, clean and jerks, power cleans, like those type of things are weightlifting. Strength training, powerlifting is your basic squat, press, deadlift, right? So those are the things that I'm referring to. Now, both of them have their own chronological age, but a bigger base in strength training can lead to quicker development in weightlifting. So training age is super important, but it has to be consistent. So consistency. If I go 1 day a week, right? You got to think of them like each day is only once a week. I don't get the whole week for that 1 day of training. I get that 1 day, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons, like you'll see, we actually strength train every single day except for your 1 day a week. So you're getting
Mm.
6 days a week of development under your training age, you know? Um, and it's because we don't do a large volume of it in one session that you're able to spread it out over more. And I'll get a little bit into why we do that. And it has to do with why we're strength training at the same time we're aerobic endurance training. Um, we actually spread the strength training a little bit thinner because we can go off a different cycle. So we usually have like a 7 day cycle for our runs and everything, but we actually go 9 to 10 days on our strength. So
Strength, yeah.
it pushes development of it a little bit, but you still get the training age out of it. So training age is super important. Training age is only counted when it's consistent, and an athlete, this is greatly important because a lot of people think I need 1-to-1, and you need a coach and you need somebody experienced watching you and helping your movement patterns, but you don't need a specialized program per se in strength training until you reach a certain level. Um, you just have to be consistent with it. Because with beginners, somebody that's under 1 year or under even sometimes 3 years, you put any program on them and they're just gonna skyrocket their strength. Those beginner gains are
Yeah.
just amazing, right? There's when you get
Mm.
to elite level lifters, if they put 10 pounds on a lift in a single year, that's like, hey, they might be on something. Like there's questions there versus beginners who will put like 50 to 100 pounds on a lift in a year. Um,
In a
the
year, yeah.
discrepancy is huge. Um, so an
Yeah.
athlete with a high training age generally requires more complex and individual programming, whereas a lower training age means that they can progress effectively with simple routines, something just like 5x5, Mad Cow, 5-3-1, Texas method, things that are just go out there and lift something, and
Mm.
you'll get strength. Uh, as long as you're
Yeah.
consistent, time over time over time again. This is long times. We're talking years here. Remember, we talked about a baby going from this born thing into 13 months later is when it takes for them to walk around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The yeah, the training age is so important, right? How do you like I don't want to I know you've got the next points, Anthony, but how do you the consistency of that is even not even more, but I'll just question you. Someone has a year of solid training, strength training for 1 year, then has 6 months off and doesn't do any strength training. 6 months, that is definitely going to affect their training age and the ability to get back into strength training, correct?
Right.
Um,
And so we'll talk about there's multiple pieces to strength training. There's muscle recruitment or muscle fiber recruitment. There's neurological adaptations to the skills, and there's the actual like muscle growth and strength, right?
yeah,
There's more than that, but we'll start with those. Yes, in terms of strength, it takes 2 weeks to for atrophy to notice to have a difference. So 2 weeks is I haven't strength trained in 2 weeks. Strength will go down 2 weeks later due to atrophy
Right.
and disuse. 6 months is a very long time, especially if you're still aerobic conditioning, because that
Yeah.
puts your body in a catabolic state, which is can be detrimental, not detrimental, but can be reductive to your strength.
Right.
Uh, you
Yeah.
won't exactly lose a pattern that you've developed, such as your back squats and everything. But if you lose your mobility because you aren't doing mobility, then yes, you could
It
lose some of
can.
those
Mm,
neurological adaptations that you made as well. So you
yeah.
can go move backwards in this, even if you have a training age
Yeah.
um, that's progressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to be specific, like these timelines are not set. Everybody's on a different timeline. It might not take you 13 months. It could take you 3 months to be like more developed at it just because of your background or your natural inclination towards this type of training. It could take you longer. If you've been
Mm,
running for a long time and never stretching and your mobility is really bad, it's gonna take you longer to get to the point where you're able to find these neurological and these other adaptions, these muscle fiber recruitment adaptions.
yeah. Definitely.
So before we go on, I want to get to one of the biggest topics on this is interference effect. What is the interference effect and how does it pertain to us, especially in hybrid training where we're all about like I'm running and lifting, I'm doing both. It's hybrid. That's what it is, multi-sport.
Mm,
Uh, I just want to preface this with we've been doing strength and conditioning for a very long time. Um, so this is important though. The interference effect refers to the phenomenon where training for strength and power and aerobic endurance simultaneously can hinder progress in one or both areas. This occurs because the types of training place contrasting demands on the body at the cellular and metabolic levels. That's what the definition is. That's what, if somebody talks about the interference effect, that's what they're talking about. Okay. Primarily, this is important. I might be getting ahead of myself here, but because, yeah, these bullet points that I've written are out of order for me. So, primarily, though, it's in the single direction of aerobic endurance affecting strength in three primary categories: muscle recruitment, hypertrophy, and power development. Those three categories are what are most talked about. Good news. In 2021, there was a meta-analysis of all the research that has been done into this effect. It had specific parameters for what qualified to meet the study, right? And I just pulled it up as on different slides. So basically, I have a link here to it, but Schumann and colleagues they identified all the studies that met the following inclusion criteria. So in order to be part of the meta-analysis of the interference effect, they had to meet these four criteria. Number one, the study needed to include a training intervention lasting at least 4 weeks. That means the study had to be 4 weeks long minimum, which can account for, so it could be 8 weeks long, it could be 12, but it had to be a minimum of four. And the remember, atrophy sets in after two, so these people are doing both training effects at least 4 weeks together. The studies needed to include groups completing identical resistance training programs, with one group performing only resistance training and at least one group performing additional aerobic training. So they had a control group and they had the study group. So that was a requirement of all the studies that they analyzed. The studies needed to include measures of maximal strength, explosive strength, and or muscle hypertrophy. And we'll get into like hypertrophy and does that pertain to us a little bit later. And then the exercises used to assess performance needed to be specific to the resistance training the subjects performed, right? So you couldn't be going and doing a bunch of back squats and then be like, oh, well, what's your leg press, right? Or like, what's your maximum um, leg extension on a machine after you've been training back squat and other things. Um, so of all the studies that they reviewed, this meta-analysis, the researchers identified 43 studies with a total of 1,090 subjects. So you're talking about 1,090 people participated that met the
Well,
inclusion criteria. So that's a pretty big sample size. Like you can get some good data here.
massive,
37,
yeah.
37 of those 43 studies measured maximal strength. Remember, there could be some crossover. They could have measured strength, explosive, and hypertrophy, but 37 of them addressed maximal strength. 18 of them measured explosive strength, and 15 assessed hypertrophy. So great, great numbers there in terms of how they're studying this. The results of that, I'll just get right into them. The results of it. There is no significant effect on hypertrophy and muscle recruitment, but it does hinder power development, which is what we're getting into in a little bit. Why we want to develop and why I'm very specific on development of RFD, rate of force development, which we'll talk on later. Um, and just for an example here, that doesn't mean somebody can be a professional level weightlifter and a world-class ultra runner. Those are the amount of training, the volume for both of those things, it would have a significant impact on that level of competition. But you can suitably develop skill in both areas simultaneously. So feasibly, you could be a marathon runner and strong in the gym. And we see this now with like these hybrid challenges that have come out, right? The 5 minute mile and the 500-pound back squat. Still
Yeah.
kind of power based and weightlifting based, I would say, because it's not long enough. But that's one example. My what I've done, the sub 3 hour marathon and the 315-pound bench press. You can keep going that. I could see in the future challenges being things like for men, a 1 hour, 18-minute half and an 1,100-pound total, powerlifting total, which is a 500 kilo powerlifting total. So something like I could see there's somebody out there that can run a 118 half marathon. So that's just under 6 minutes per mile and do a 450-pound deadlift, a 350-pound back squat, and a 300-pound bench press. I could absolutely see that. And for everybody not in America, which is apparently 75 to 76% of our listener base, that's a 205 kilo deadlift, a 160 kilo back squat, and a 135 kilo bench press.
Well,
Um, I think the equivalent for this for women would be something like a 122 half marathon, so an hour 22, and a 750-pound or 340 kilo total. So that's just like so anybody can reference kind of what I'm talking about. Those kind of things are possible. They're not elite level in either discipline, but they are very high level. You're talking,
mm,
basically 90th percentile, maybe a little bit higher in both of those dichotomy sports, like those sports that are contentious, right? Um, so I think that's pretty neat. Uh,
just
all right.
yeah. Sorry, no, you continue, and then I've got a question.
Oh, you can ask your question. I'm on to a new slide.
I was just gonna just for my own and obviously the listeners as well, if to clarify, strength training, sorry, aerobic training, cardiovascular training can interfere with your strength, but strength training doesn't necessarily interfere with your aerobic cardiovascular. Is that
That's
correct?
kind of what the study showed. There was a correlation. I think they talked about p values that in terms of statistics, there's a p value, and that p value tells you correlation. Don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was pretty low, like a zero point 0.4 or something. Maybe it was like zero point 0.8 something. Um, but there was pretty low correlation between does strength affect your running and does running affect your
Yeah.
strength. Now, take that with if you're just starting out and you are over strength training, you are going to be sore. Soreness
Yeah.
will affect how you run, right?
Mm.
So give it a little bit of time to develop in that direction. Um, but yes, that's essentially is they were measuring for the interference effect. Does strength training affect aerobic performance, and does aerobic performance affect strength training? right?
Strength training.
And what they found was uh, not really going strength to aerobic and not really going from aerobic to strength in terms of
Strength.
muscle growth, which is hypertrophy, and in terms of muscle fiber recruitment. But it does have some effect on power and power development.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's very interesting, especially obviously what we're doing as hybrid athletes. Yeah.
Yes.
Just to understand.
Yeah. All right. So development of strength. Everybody's like, okay, you're talking about strength, but how do you actually get strong? Right. And this is what something you brought up earlier that we're going to get into, which is progressive overload. So imagine like your life of strength on the farm. You've been people can be strong without this crazy long training age, right? How come these guys that grow up on farms, they have never stepped in a gym and squat or pressed or deadlift, but they step in and the first thing they're able to do is deadlift 500 pounds and squat 400 pounds. And uh, people are like, wow, this guy's so strong. He's never done it before. How come he's developed so well? Well, imagine like farm work. You're doing loaded carries all the time. So these guys are doing, first off, your body moves properly when you're born. You
Mm.
have great mobility. You have great mechanics. We lose that over time just from, like we talked about, not doing it. You know,
Mm.
when you were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, were you squatting every day? Were you
Mm.
deadlifting every day? Even then, you still probably had pretty good mechanics. But somewhere along the way, as you led into adulthood, especially people who just find fitness in their 30s or 40s or 60s, 70s, they don't find it early enough, and they've had bad habits or their mobility is poor in terms of being able to lift something up, and they can't get into these positions. So you have to make accommodations for that, so they can properly get into it. Or, you've had an injury in your life, you have an impingement now, and you can't lift a certain way. That happens too. So just, yes, there is some exceptions, but just imagine if somebody grew up on a farm, came in and is just amazingly strong. It's their life up to that point that led to the start of their training age and coming out that way. All
Yeah.
people develop at different rates. Babies develop at different rates. Like there's ranges for when should they walk, when should they crawl, There's ranges of months. Um, so it's you're not behind, you're just different. It depends on people, depends on you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean more genetically gifted or anything at that point. It's just what you've done in your life to get to that point.
Mm.
One of my favorite stories, just to be an example of progressive overload, it's the story of Milo of Croton. Okay, he was a wrestler, right? Ancient Greece. He would carry a calf. They talked about his over the summer and the 4 years between games. What would he do? How would Milo get so strong and be this beast of a wrestler, right? Well, his training was he back then everybody worked, but he would carry a calf on his shoulders every day from the day it was born. So a baby calf is born, he'd carry it on his shoulders. And then until he'd carry it every single day, certain distances, until it was a full grown bull, right? So you'd pick it
Wow.
up, lift it up, and carry it. This calf got used to it, right? So you don't notice the load increase day to day. I pick you up this day, I pick you up that day. It might be a pound, a half pound, in kilos, it might be a quarter kilo, a half kilo. It could be less one day, a little bit less, a little bit more. Like there's fluctuations. It's steady up, but it's like fluctuating up and down that steady up,
Yeah.
right? You don't notice the load increase from day to day. But over 4 years, the difference between a calf and a bull is huge. And that is the example of progressive overload, right?
That's a great
Slowly,
example, actually.
every single day, just a little bit more. And so just to get into what it means to be strong, strength is based on a cross-sectional area of the muscles times the amount of muscle recruitment, right? So how big your muscle is and cross-sectional area times how many of those muscle fibers are actually firing and getting recruited to perform whatever exercise you're doing. So to get stronger, you either have to increase the cross-sectional area, hypertrophy, or increase the muscle fiber recruitment, right? us as hybrid athletes trying to also run, you don't really want to increase hypertrophy very much. Like there's a certain size you want to get to, right? But you don't want to like just get super, super swollen. You don't want to like increase that muscle hypertrophy to a maximal amount. It'd be far better to for your running and your the damage you take while running if you just had more muscle fibers firing and you were
Firing, yeah.
firing the maximum amount you could in your muscles cross-sectional area. So we'll get into a little bit about that, but that is like the difference between hypertrophy to get strong and muscle fiber recruitment to get strong. And what did we say earlier? The interference effect doesn't affect either of those two things. It does affect power, which we'll get into, which is um, coming up soon. But progressive overload, it increases you increase the demand on the muscles just as their load increases. More muscle fibers are recruited to handle the weight, especially the fast twitch muscle fibers, which are crucial for strength. Whereas in terms of running, slow twitch are very good aerobically, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now we're going to talk about rate of force development, unless you have any questions.
No, no, I don't. Not yet.
Okay.
I do, but I like where it's going.
Okay.
Continue, Anthony, continue.
So RFD. So what is RFD? RFD is the rate of force development. It measures how quickly an individual can generate force in a short period of time. It's typically measured from the onset of a muscle contraction to the peak force production, right? It's a crucial metric for activities that require explosive power, like sprinting, jumping, and Olympic weightlifting. Yep.
So, yep, nope,
All right.
yep.
All right. So RFD indicates the speed at which force is applied. Not just the maximum force output, how quickly you can move a load, not how much you can move it. So two people, for example, lifting the same load could or would have different RFD based on how quickly that load is lifted. For example,
Correct, yeah.
the example that I've used before that I've taken from one of the my strength training books that I really like is there's two shot putters, right? A very high level collegiate coach was training these two shot putters. And one of the shot put throwers was able to throw a shot put consistently further than another teammate of his, right? And so, but in terms of all the metrics that were measured, these guys were almost identical. How come this guy was
Right.
able to throw the shot put further every single time when all their metrics were the same? Well, the coach brought out this special thing like to measure the rate at which it is. One of the things they measured, especially for shot putters, was bench press, right? So bench press, they had the same maximum bench press, but one of the guys was able to do his maximum bench press about 3/10 of a second faster at his peak load than the other guy. So these two guys, the one that always threw the ball further was he was at his maximum load. He couldn't add another pound, another kilo, but the rate at which he did the explosive portion, the contraction, pushing the bar from his chest to extension, was 3/10 of a second faster than the other guy doing the same weight. Right.
Interesting.
So that
It,
is RFD, the speed at which you're able to move the force, at which your
yep,
force is applied. Right.
yep.
And then there's also a neuromuscular contribution. So improved neural drive and efficiency and efficient motor recruitment are key for RFD. All right. So early in a strength
RFD. Oh, keep going.
so early in a strength training program, gains come from the nervous system's ability to better coordinate and recruit muscle units. So groups of muscle fibers activated by a single motor neuron.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just I was just going to ask, RFD, the rate, can that be um what's the right term? the way that you can get better at power, you know, RFD performance is to um focus on your pure strength and to get better at or to get stronger for the sake of getting stronger. Is that how you can get better at or get quicker at power movements? Is to develop your pure strength so that your ceiling is higher. That's what I'm trying to say.
Kind of. It's the velocity you want to apply to those loads. So yes, getting stronger will help you at those lower loads, but we'll get into actually how to develop power that contributes to RFD. And that's what we'll be talking
Yeah,
about in a little bit.
yeah. And
Yeah.
just quickly, like it's interesting, Anthony, when we have topics like this, and you've got all the information there. I always try to, and for the listeners, I'm listening here and trying to put it into examples of what we're doing as hybrid athletes.
Yeah.
And as an example, I'll just go back to what the question was in my head. My question was to get better at the sled push. Is it to develop as a power output um, station? Is it to actually get better at your back squat, front squat, or lunging pure strength? Or is it the other way around? That's kind of where I'm going when I'm I'm listening to you. Just so the listeners understand what I'm thinking.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. We want to know how does this apply, right? That's super important. So
Yeah,
one of the things I know we're gonna wrap up here soon, but there's if you want to improve your RFD, one of the things you can do is the three phases of lifting. There's the three phases would be your eccentric phase, your isometric, and your concentric, right? And just real brief explanations and definitions of those. The eccentric phase is the lengthening contraction of muscle. So a muscle lengthens while under tension. So while you're slowly lowering, this could be on the bench press lowering, it could be on the squat, it could be on the deadlift as you're slowly picking it up. Or sorry, deadlift is slowly lowering to the ground is eccentric. Sorry.
yeah,
Um, it creates a more powerful stretch shortening cycle, which is essential in the rapid movements. So rapid would be our power movements. It contributes to a quicker, more powerful concentric action, which enhances RFD. Isometric is the static contraction. It holds the contraction without any change in length. So your muscle length doesn't change because you're holding a static contraction. That's what isometric is. It enhances stability and control, which allows for better force transfer and improved motor unit recruitment. It's stronger platform for explosive movements, making it easier to produce force rapidly from the change between eccentric and concentric phases. Everything passes through an isometric phase, right?
yeah.
So just like if I throw a ball up, it goes up, it has to reach zero velocity before it starts to come back down.
Goes
That
down,
zero
yeah.
velocity point is your isometric phase. You squat, there's a point where you go from going down to turning and going up. That's where you hold. That's the isometric
Hence
phase.
why you've been giving me, um,
Tempos.
correct me if I'm wrong, a back squat session each week, which I'm pausing.
Yeah. And
Yep,
then there's a concentric. Concentric is the shortening contraction. So muscle shortens while generating force. Standing out of the squat as an example, pulling the deadlift off the ground, pressing the bench off your chest. It directly trains the nervous system and the muscle fibers to produce force quickly. It creates dynamic and explosive movements. Okay.
yeah,
Um, and so just going into how does this all relate back to what we were talking about? I want to mitigate the interference effect on power, right? As a hybrid athlete, I want to know how do I keep that power that the interference effect of my aerobic training is affecting. One of the best things I've found is what's called the French contrast method. It combines complex and contrasting training to improve strength, power, and velocity. So you do basically what the French contrast method is, and this will sound familiar to anybody that's on the hybrid engine. It'll definitely sound familiar to you, JK, because you'll be like, oh, that's what you're doing to me. It's heavy resistance exercise, something like an 80% back squat, immediately paired with a plyometric exercise like box jumps. And then you
Okay.
rest, right?
Yeah.
You go immediately from this heavy resistance to a power-based movement, such or plyo, such as that. It also is something like go from a bench press to a plyo push-up,
Yeah.
or like an explosive strict pull-up. Those are the types of things that we're talking about. It helps build that power reduction resistance from the interference effects we discussed earlier, and it promotes muscle recruitment. Additionally, aerobic endurance training can be a benefit to strength training. With some aerobic training, weightlifters and powerlifters capture more volume in their sessions while working on less rest and more capillary beds that have been developed through their aerobic system that can deliver blood to the working muscles. So,
Right.
if you are just a weightlifter or a strength trainer, do a little bit of cardio, maybe 3 times a week, light cardio, 10, 15, 20 minutes. You'll get so much benefit out of it. It doesn't have to be running either. It could be like on the bike, rower, something power based, but just do some aerobic movement. You'll get way more benefit out of it than it is detrimental to you.
I'm
Uh,
assuming there's a line there though, right? I'm assuming if there's a line,
if
if you
you're,
are a strength athlete, there'd
if
be a line that if you go too far.
Right, but we're talking about the interference effect not really having an effect, but yes, there is a certain point, but what that point is a lot further than you think.
Okay. That's
Um,
interesting.
so how does this all apply to hybrid and our fitness racing? I do
Yeah.
that through applied strength, right? So our applied strength. How come in these races we don't do squats, deadlifts, and presses like pure heavy squats, presses, and deadlifts? Why do we need to develop them? Uh,
Mm.
And what is applied strength? Applied strength is two external objects and explosive power. It's like, okay, I've developed my raw power lifts, my squat, my press, and my deadlift. Now what? Right? You apply it to an external load. So this is like, if anybody doesn't know already, my background's in wrestling. We do all this training and then we apply it to external load. It's just our external load is somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Um, this could be in weightlifting. So in weightlifting, you build all this power against the interference effect because you're doing power cleans, you're doing snatches. A snatch, a pure snatch, is the most powerful explosive movement you can do with your body. It is taking something from the ground, the longest, furthest distance you can, as rapidly as you can. It is in terms of like what measures power. If power is and intensity is power, and power is um, force times distance over time, the most explosive, the biggest thing you can do with the biggest force, travel the longest distance in the shortest amount of time is going to be a snatch.
Wow.
Um,
Yep.
and then so how do you apply it to external loads? You can do it with weightlifting, odd objects like sandbags, D-balls, kettlebells, axle bars, logs, or loaded carries, rucking, farmer carry, yoke carry, all that. The application of force and the rate at which you can produce that force, RFD, is paramount in applying the base level of strength you developed. So this is important in sled pushes, sled pulls, farmer carries, sandbag walking lunges, and even wall balls. Those are the positions where we are applying force to an external object. Also happens in rowing and skiing too, but that's a little different because that's also aerobic.
Mm. Yeah.
Does that make sense in
Yeah.
terms of development? Um,
Definitely.
we'll do
Applied
another,
strength through applied strength.
yeah.
For the listeners, can you give an example of an applied strength session in HYROX?
Yeah, so
Just so it's
one that you've
simplified.
done, one that I really like to
Yep.
give you, a 10-minute EMOM of
Yep.
10 wall balls with a 30-pound ball or 12-kilo ball to 10 feet,
So a
and then
heavier wobble than what I normally
heavier wall
do.
ball than you normally do, and then one power clean,
Yep.
and build up the weight on the power clean.
Yep. And the reason why I'm going heavier than what I normally do on race day is
So, like I talked about, either that French contrast method, right? We're developing a heavier external load to you, and then we're switching. This time it's a little bit backwards, but we're switching to a power-based movement, power clean.
power-based movement. Yeah.
So you're doing essentially what is a hard load to a power.
Yeah. It's actually one of my favorite EMOMs that you give me, actually.
Yep.
I love
We
that
go a
one.
lot with
Actually, not every time that I do it, but most of the time.
yeah.
I'm going to say most of the time.
Most of the time it's nice. When it's only like 8 to 10 reps, it's nice. When it gets to like 15 reps, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And we will do strength in a later episode again, a little bit more into it. And I think the next time we do it, we will do examples of what some strength training is.
Yeah.
But right now, I think sticking with the basics, 5x5, Mad Cow, 5-3-1, Texas Method, those types of things, and not getting too complicated. You don't need to do like the Eastern European block strength training that's massive
No.
volume. You don't need to do that yet. When you're much, much more advanced, you can start to get into things like that. But for now, let's leave those Bulgarian and Hungarian methods alone and just work on basics, doing it. And what I love about strength training is like, even if you don't feel like doing it, it's not really that hard to just, especially if you have weights at home, go outside, just start with a 3x3, maybe make it a 5x3, um, add a little bit of load. It doesn't have to be heavy, you know, it's in terms of your 1 rep max. If you get like above 60%, there's benefit. There's a lot of
Yeah.
benefit. You can do more reps. And we'll get into the difference later between muscle endurance and hypertrophy and how is a 5x12 different from doing hypertrophy 5x12 and stuff.
And to simplify, if you lifted 50 kilos last week, this week try to lift 51. Progressive overload. It's as simple as that when it comes down to uh, progressive overload for strength. But Anthony, I think you're right. I think this is part one of a couple of strength podcasts.
Yeah.
Because we could keep going.
Absolutely. And so we'll
Um,
apply this one as strength for hybrid athletes. And when he talks about that progressive overload, doesn't mean 1 rep max it. Don't 1 rep max every week and try to get a higher number. Do a sustainable effort. So something like 3, 4s, 5s reps, maybe 8 reps. Those are going to be the most beneficial and easiest to add 1 kilo more, 1 pound more.
yeah,
You know?
exactly. Yep. Yep.
But I think that's all for today. Sorry, we have a little shortened episode. But JK, do you want to close us out here?
Thank you once again, Anthony, for most of the content today, and the information. And I will see you guys or the listeners maybe in Hong Kong. Hopefully we can get that bonus episode with the girls after our race. And guys and girls, if you're wanting to ever reach out about coaching or training or all things hybrid, don't be afraid to message myself on Instagram, jk.jameskelly.
Yep. Thank you guys. If you get an opportunity, please like or review the show. It really helps us get out there and get exposed to more people. One of our primary goals here is to help as many people as we can in this space. And leaving a review, rating, comment, liking, following, subscribing, all that, that is really big in the algorithm to get us out to the more people we're looking for. So I appreciate it. You can find me at the Hybrid Engine on Instagram or at the Hybrid Engine on YouTube. And also we have obviously the podcast YouTube at Hybrid Coaching Podcast. So if you get an opportunity to go
Yep.
like and subscribe there, that'd be helpful too. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Hybrid Coaching Podcast. If you have any questions you'd like your hosts to answer, or if you'd like to reach out and ask us any questions or inquire about training, please reach out to James Kelly on Instagram at jk.jameskelly. That's jk.jameskelly on Instagram. Or you can find him, Georgie Vesley and James Kelly, on YouTube. You can also find me, Anthony Parasini, at The Hybrid Engine on Instagram or The Hybrid Engine on YouTube. Thank you again for listening and have a great day.